Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking a few minutes to attend the Graduate School's orientation section on Student Disability Services. My name is Corey Blunt. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Disability Services, and today I'm going to provide a brief overview of my department and the services we provide to students. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce you to the rest of the SDS staff. Stacy Raycraft is the director of our department and has worked in the office for over 20 years. The handsome guy to the right is me. I've been with the university in various capacities for about 10 years now. I'm also a graduate student and I'm earning a PhD in special education, so I'm in the trenches with you. Next is my colleague and good friend, Robin Yakaitis. She, along with Summer Chappell and Tammy Rubenstein, are the Access Service Advisors in the department, and they work with students to determine which accommodations are needed to meet each student's individual needs. Summer Chappell is also the university's sign language interpreter, and she coordinates the services for deaf and hard of hearing students on campus. Next is Bernice Sykes. She's the department's administrative coordinator. She's the hub of our office and makes sure that we all stay in line. Jim Weir is our adaptive technology specialist. He works with students to provide course materials in accessible formats like ebooks and audiobooks, and he manages the adaptive computer programs that a lot of students may need to ensure they have access to everything they need in the classroom. Last, but certainly not least, Mary Ann Walsh and Brandy Bacon work in the SDS Testing Center in Kennard Hall. They oversee testing services for students who require testing accommodations and use our department for space. So, now that you know everybody, let's move on to the fun stuff. SDS is a student-centered office, and our mission is modeled from the social justice framework of disability. In the spirit of equity and in collaboration with a larger campus community, Student Disability Services leads the university in its commitments to recognize disability as a valued aspect of diversity, to embrace access as a matter of social justice, and to design more welcoming and inclusive environments. Essentially, our goal is to promote independence and self-advocacy by ensuring all students, regardless of ability, have equal access to a quality education, and we do so by facilitating the removal of artificial barriers. What this means is we don't believe that disability is a person-centered deficit. Rather, the deficit is in the way that the environment is designed. So for example, a person who's deaf isn't disabled because they can't hear. They're disabled because society has designed a world around the ability to hear. So ultimately, our goal is to help redesign society and create an environment that everybody can access regardless of ability. Approximately 1,000 students are registered with SDS, and our numbers rise every semester. We work with a diverse population of students with disabilities, and these disabilities range in variations such as attention disorders, learning disabilities, psychological disorders, mobility issues, neurological disorders, students who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, have low vision, or who have chronic illnesses. In order to ensure equal access, our staff works with students on an individual basis to determine how each student is impacted by their diagnosis and their environment, and to identify accommodations that remove those barriers. Some of the examples of accommodations that we provide are preferential seating, supplemental note-taking services, and other methods of lecture acquisition. We provide extended time on timed exams, and we can also provide a testing environment with reduced distractions. We provide students with course materials in accessible formats like ebooks and audiobooks. We train students on adaptive technology software like screen readers, speech-to-text programs, and text-to-speech programs. We also work with students who need modifications to certain university policies, such as course attendance policies. And we work with students who need housing-based accommodations for those that are living in campus-owned housing. Our department is really student-driven. We don't actively seek out students with disabilities to register them for in our office or for accommodations. Rather, we believe that students are their own experts, and we support their autonomy. And in doing so, if a student feels they need to be registered with us and receive accommodations, we expect students to reach out to us and to initiate that dialogue. For students who do want to reach out and begin the registration process, it's a pretty straightforward process. First, the student submits an online application along with supporting documentation from a licensed healthcare provider. Next, one of our staff members will meet with the student to learn more about their diagnosis, how they're impacted, and to determine what accommodations may be most appropriate. Once we meet with the students, review those notes, and review the student's documentation, our staff makes recommendations for accommodations. To complete the process, the student will meet with SDS for one final meeting, the approval meeting, to finalize their registration with the office and receive instructions on how to inform their professors about their accommodations. To reiterate, the first step is to go to the SDS website, complete an online application, and submit supporting documentation. Next, call the office and schedule your initial interview meeting with one of our staff members. We can meet over the phone or via Zoom. Now, once COVID ends and the world reopens, we'll be happy to meet with you in person. Until then, we will continue to observe social distancing practices. Going back to the documentation portion of the process, it's important that you include information from your healthcare provider about your diagnosis and how you're impacted by it. Along with talking to you, the documentation provides a clear description of how you may be impacted, and it helps us determine which accommodations are most appropriate and the most beneficial. Now, if you've never used accommodations or registered with Student Disability Services, you may have some questions, and I'd like to address some of the more common questions now. One common question that we get is, if I register with SDS, will it show up on my transcript? And the answer is no. Your registration with SDS is not listed on any permanent record. It stays in our office and doesn't go anywhere unless you want it to. For example, if you transfer to another university to continue your graduate studies and you want to use accommodations at that other university, you can ask us to transfer your records from our office to their disability support office. Another question that we often get is, will my professors know my diagnoses or any other information that I share with SDS? And the answer is no. We do not disclose any information to instructors. Students choose what information they want to share with instructors, and that includes your diagnosis or any other information you think is pertinent. The information that SDS shares with your instructors only deals with the accommodations that you choose to let them know about. Another question that we often get is, what is the deadline for applying for accommodations? And the answer is there is none. There is no deadline because disability is fluid. It's not reasonable to have a deadline for requesting equal access. Access is everyone's responsibility all of the time. Another question that we often get is, what if one of my professors doesn't let me use one of my accommodations? This is a little bit more tricky. Accommodations are provided on a case-by-case, class-by-class basis. Occasionally, an accommodation may fundamentally alter the nature of a course, or the way that the professor is able to assess your knowledge or your ability. For an example, not that any of you are doing this, but let's say that you are taking a swimming class and your instructor is testing you on your ability to swim 2 laps in 2 minutes. If you're approved for extended time on your test, we can't provide that extended time for your 2 laps in 2 minutes because time is part of the assessment, and extending that time would change the way that the teacher is able to assess you. However, before a professor can refuse to provide an accommodation, they have to contact SDS first. We will determine if an accommodation poses a fundamental alteration to the course, and if it does, we will reach out to you, the student, and we will stay in touch with the professor. Until a decision is reached, however, instructors must continue to provide all approved accommodations. So that's really it for the common questions that we typically get, and I'm about to wrap up my little spiel for you. My final piece of advice to you all is this: be aware of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to your academic endeavors. Recognize your needs and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Actively seek on-campus resources and maintain an open line of communication with your professors. Lastly, please feel free to call my office. Our staff will be happy to provide you with any information or resources that we have at our disposal. I appreciate your time, and I wish you good luck in your academic endeavors. Welcome to the graduate school, y'all. Hotty toddy.